What happens when the people who once cared for us now need us to care for them? Today's guest knows that heartbreak, honor, and the complexity of stepping into that role, and how unprepared we can be. Welcome to Her Next Chapter. I'm Karen Maurer, financial advisor and partner with Krilogy Financial here in St. Louis. And today we talk about preparing for, moving through, and thriving during life's transitions with complexity, care, and compassion. Today's guest is Pam Hendry. Pam has been navigating this journey firsthand and is going to share with us her honesty about being caught in the messy middle. Pam is a proud wife to husband Darren, owner of Blind Ambition, and mom to 3 boys, a wonderful daughter-in-law, and a new daughter-in-law to come in the fall. She has 2 bonus children and a thriving business, and truly lives in what she affectionately calls a full home.
Definitely.
But even with all that fullness, nothing prepares you for the unexpected transition of watching a parent's health change, especially when dementia enters the picture. Pam, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. Would you take us back to when you first started recognizing some changes in your father?
Yes. So I actually wasn't the one that noticed it first. I was out of town, and my husband my dad had come over to have dinner with my husband. They're both Army vets, and they love hanging out together. And so they were playing pool and cards like they normally do. And my husband noticed some behaviors that were not normal for my dad. He was having really severe headaches. That would it would just stop him in his tracks. And he described them as, it felt like lightning strikes going through his head. And there were some other things that he just seemed a little off on.
Sure.
And so as I was speaking to my husband that night, he mentioned it, and we decided that it was something that we needed to look into. After we talked about it, we realized that about 3 weeks prior, he had been in a car accident.
Okay.
And so with that car accident, he didn't tell us about it until it was it might have been that evening with that he was over with my husband that he actually told us that he had the accident.
So weeks later?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And, they had taken him to the emergency room and in the ambulance and everything. And his car was totaled. He bought a new car. He went through the whole process.
All on his own?
All on his own. Didn't tell anybody and didn't remember a lot of it.
Oh, wow. And not just the car accident he didn't remember, but everything thereafter.
Right. He didn't remember going to buy the new car. He didn't remember, he'd called a personal injury attorney, and he didn't remember calling them. He had actually signed papers with them and everything and had no recollection of any of it.
And they wouldn't have known that he was not cognitively on top of things.
Not at all.
Wow.
And so they did nothing wrong. He just couldn't remember. So that was when we really started noticing it. And then it was his headaches that we addressed first.
Yeah.
Through that process, he was sent for a lot of testing, and the diagnosis came back that he was in the early stages of dementia, and that the car accident had basically expedited that. It had been some memory loss prior to the accident, but at 86 it was age appropriate, nothing out of the ordinary.
Sure.
And said there's been a steady decline since.
Okay. And how long ago was this?
2 years ago now.
Oh, okay. So he still lives in his home on his own, right?
He does.
Okay. So how do you keep him safe? How do you protect him? And is he okay with this? Because I know, taking somebody's independence away is really tragic for them.
Well, it is. And, finding out when the right timing is to address those things is difficult too. You want to respect their independence. On the other side, you also know that the things that you take away from them, you also have to take on. So there's a fine line of, respecting all of that. If you
can't drive anymore, then somebody's got to drive them.
Exactly.
Sure.
So as far as keeping him safe in his home, we put cameras around on the outside of his home. And then we got a smart medication dispenser that allows us to fill it every day for a month. And then he uses his fingerprint to touch it, and it releases his morning medication, and then he does it again in the evening. We get notifications that he's done that,
that's
so
great.
that we can tell that he's up and moving around.
Sure.
Just having the cameras outside, it also sends us notice every time there's movement, so that we can
So if
see.
he's outside taking a walk or goes down to get the mail or something,
We can do,
Definitely.
and that was a key point, because he'll go to walk to get his mail every day, and he struggles to get back. And so now we can see that he got back and he's in his house and he hasn't fallen or something like that.
Sure.
So
And you can see if it's improving or if it's consistent and if there's been any change.
absolutely. We also put tracking on his phone, so that we can see where he's at all times.
And he's okay with all of this, or he knows that it's to keep him safe.
Exactly. Yes, he's totally fine with all of it. We did talk to him about doing it. Today, I don't know that he remembers that it's there, but he was okay with it at the time that we did it.
Right. So you feel comfortable with not violating anything or taking anything away.
Absolutely.
Just keeping him safe.
Everything that we've done, we've talked to him about first.
Sure, sure. And how did you know what to do? How do you know what steps, and you mentioned when to have those conversations with him?
Right. So there's absolutely nothing out there, no training to go through this that I've been able to find. We were at one of his appointments, and there was another physician that was in the waiting room with her family. And she had been through this and gave me some pointers. And so that was extremely helpful. She was the one that actually mentioned putting the cameras outside so that you can see that, inside when they start to become, a little more advanced. But, leaving that independence and that respect for them, as long as we can. She also then talked about going through and contacting an occupational therapist before he needs it, so they can start helping him navigate putting on shoes and socks. Even dressing himself when it's hard to bend down to pull, shoes up, pants up, things like that. And so we have reached out, and he'll be starting that occupational therapy as well, just to try to stay ahead of that.
Sure. So just a little planning and preparation for what they know is probably coming.
Exactly.
Well, it's a shame that the resources aren't readily available to you. I know I deal with an older demographic for my clients, and I deal a lot in that senior care space. Right. And, either finding a care concierge who can kind of walk you through and connect you with all those resources. I know there are some areas and some places that specialize in memory decline and, cognitive disabilities. But again, it depends where you're located. It depends on the convenience of, do they come to you, or do you have to bring, your family member to them, and at least, be able to find some tips and tricks of things of what to do. I mean, it's sometimes these things we don't have any idea what to do until we're in the middle of it. Right.
Absolutely. And it's something that you don't prepare for like you should.
What would you have done differently?
I think when we initially saw some decline in his both physical and mental, I think at that point, had we, with my brothers and I, had a conversation of what that looks like. My dad is, a single man. He's not married, so he's living literally by himself. I have one brother in Florida. I have one brother that's here. However, he's dealing with his own health issues, so he's unable to help.
So you're doing all this on your own?
With my husband, yes.
With your husband, wow.
And he's a tremendous help. But, had we had conversations prior to this, we could have maybe had plans on how to address it.
Right.
Instead of trying to figure it out as we go through it.
Sure.
Even knowing what benefits he had already purchased for himself or was entitled to as a veteran.
The military, right?
And that takes time, and navigating that at the time you need it is not ideal.
And you mean with respect to long-term care, if you have long-term care insurance, or finding out those benefits from the VA? Absolutely.
Long-term, but also, the short-term where he's at now, the in-home help that he, could possibly get. Knowing what that looked like before you needed it would have been helpful.
Yeah. We deal a lot with adults like ourselves. When is the right time to have those conversations? My parents are 86 and going to be 90 this year. And honestly, my brother and I just sat down with him last month and said, we need to know exactly what's going on, what your wishes are.
Right.
Because if you do start to cognitively decline, you know, it's not as clear what your wishes are.
Right.
And the whole perception of what's going to happen isn't quite as clear as you'd like it to be. So, you know, we're, you know, writing notes so that we remember. We have those conversations more often. But, you know, we do talk a lot about how do you start that conversation? How do you say, you know, we need to understand your financial situation so that we can be prepared. You know, if you're going to have to carry the financial cost of any care your father needs, you need to know that.
Right, exactly.
And for your own planning. But it's a difficult conversation to have.
And I think, you know, in our generation anyway, or my generation, I feel like we were taught by our parents that, like, money's not something you ask people about. You don't ask.
It's private.
Right, it's a private matter. And even though you're parents, you don't, or I just didn't feel like I should be asking them about their financial status. In hindsight, I needed to. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I encourage others in that situation to do so.
Sure. Yeah, I've had situations where people have come in after the parent passed and said, I found this piece of paper. What does this mean? And I look at it and, you know, maybe the beneficiary was the widow and, you know, somebody who passed 20 years beforehand. So just things like keeping all that stuff up to date. So when the surviving spouse passes, at least we have everything moving in the right direction and you don't have that headache for the family that's already grieving and going through that loss.
Definitely, you know, and through the process, you know, going through all of his records from before, finding some of those things that he hadn't done that, you know, I had no idea hadn't been done.
Yeah. And you think, thank goodness I'm over here kind of digging through this stuff and going through it.
Right.
Why he can still sign and why he can still make some changes or on more clear days answer some questions for you, hopefully.
Definitely. You know, things like, you know, personal property tax, you know, or through his mortgage, he was paying, you know, his taxes. But he would get a statement and he thought it was a bill. So for 2 years, he double paid it.
Wow.
But I had no clue until I started digging into things. So
you already have a full-time job.
This is correct. Yes.
And you're a wife and a mom and a friend and all those other things too. So how do you balance that? How do you balance that time and how do you take care of yourself?
That's a great question. You just do what you can. Unfortunately, there's no magic solution or no magic pill or anything for that. You just do the best you can. And my husband has been probably the best support through all of it. And he reminds me daily, I can only be as good to anybody else as I am to myself. So you have to take care of yourself.
Yes.
In order to take care of others.
Right. And that's so true. Yeah. And it's easily said, but very hard to do, especially when you're in a situation where you want to be proactive, but you also have to be reactive. You have to, if you catch something on that camera, you've got to drop everything and get over there.
Absolutely.
Even though you want to be proactive by having the cameras in there and you think that's going to, you know, give you some space.
Exactly. Just like when we caught him shoveling his snow because he didn't realize he couldn't. And he has a steep driveway. If you would have fallen down there, that's something that you have to go to immediately.
Yes. I see my 90-year-old father insisted on getting out there and doing the snow as well. And as much as we all scolded him, you know, that independence, and he was going to do it as long as he could.
Right.
But yeah, it's so frustrating. It's very frustrating. So he doesn't drive anymore, or does he?
He still drives. We have an appointment coming up to discuss this with the doctor. So we'll see how much longer he can drive. He knows that he can't go anywhere without his phone. GPS tells him every turn to make, and he's terrified every day that if he loses his phone, he'll be lost.
Right. Right. And that's the last thing. We certainly don't want to send everybody out looking for him.
Right.
Well, and I know there are several, I know of several independent people or companies that will do driving assessments, because we've talked about this and when do you broach this subject. And what I like is they say, we'll do the driving assessment. The message will come from us. and it doesn't get filed with the doctor. So it doesn't become a matter of their record, and they can have that conversation. And if nothing else, at least be aware of what their weaknesses are, where their blind spots are, where maybe they're not as reactive. Because certainly taking away the keys is a really difficult. And when you don't have your other brothers physically there, to do it, you're the bad person.
Right. Well, exactly. So you're the bad person, but not only that, having, a full-time job and, a family of, my own, that's a lot of responsibility that, we also have to assume. But you become that bad guy, and then because you aren't able to go maybe get him and take him everywhere that he may want to go, then that slows him down even more, which then his movement slows down, which is then his physical.
Yeah, it's kind of a spiral.
Right. And so that's one of those things we've talked a lot about, and we want to take away as late as we possibly can, but we want him safe as well. Because we feel like that's going to be the really start of a significant decline.
Yeah. That makes sense. And as much as there are plenty of resources out there and services where they will come pick him up and take him places, if he's cognitively declining, you don't want it to be the responsibility of the driver to remind him where he was going or what his appointment, get him into the doctor's office. You can't just throw him in the car with anybody.
Right.
So you do kind of have to take that on yourself.
You also have to worry about whether people will take advantage of somebody like that.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Even if it is, an Uber or whatever, you don't know who that's going to be. And if they know that it's somebody that can't tell them where they live.
Right. I have a client whose parent was cognitively declining, and he had her phone number and her email forwarded to his numbers. And then he had certain numbers, mine being one of them, and a couple people that were trusted, that he would allow that phone number to go through to her house so she could still answer the call, but any other call got routed to him.
That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah, so he didn't fall victim to all of these scams that are so convincing, for the healthiest of people. So
definitely. And, especially when they start preying on, grandchildren and things like that. And then, saying that there's something wrong with them, it's easy for them to fall victim to.
Right. And the other thing too is subscriptions. I mean, I had a client who, same thing, and all of a sudden was signing up for subscriptions, and the wife brought in the bank statements, and we looked, and he had $500 a month of subscriptions that he had signed up for that she had no idea, because she just hadn't been the one involved in the bank statements.
Right.
So that had been going on well before they even recognized that cognitive decline.
Right.
So those little things, like you said, of paying property taxes and not remembering. And there's also, those great services where people will come in and do all of that bookkeeping for you and keep track of all those medical costs and help the elderly person pay their bills but still maintain their independence, not have to rely. But again, you've got to have the trust that it's a trusted source and that, it makes sense for everybody.
Absolutely. Being able to find a service like that, though, allows them to stay in their home a little bit longer, too.
Right.
So,
and I think it allows them to feel more independent, that they're not relying on their children to do things. I think that's the toughest. I think they'd rather go to an outside source to, just like you might hire somebody to cut your grass now or plow your snow, than to expect the children to do it.
Right, because they do get to a point that they start to feel like a burden to you as well, because they start knowing, and now they're afraid to ask for things that they need because they don't want to bother you, but they need it. So.
Right. That's a really good point. And you're more than happy to do it, but if you don't know.
Right. And
so again, kind of having that conversation ahead of time, having that preparation in place lets them know, hey, if this starts happening, this is our plan that we have in place for this.
Right.
Might help make that transition for them and you a bit smoother.
Definitely. One of the other things that we have done for him is typically on Sundays we'll do our food prep, and so we will food prep his meals for the entire week in individual containers. So when we go over there, we can see how much he's eating, make sure he's eating, because we know how much we gave him.
Right.
So that helps us monitor, like, his food that he is eating and drinking.
And make sure he's eating balanced and not just,
Absolutely.
Eating candy. And because I know sugar affects.
It would be chocolate cake every day. Yes.
If somebody just brings him a chocolate cake. Yes. Does he get company and visitors from a community, or is he more isolated?
He has a lady friend that he sees once a week. And so that helps him kind of get out and move around.
Sure.
He is still on a golf league that he rides the cart around on for the most part, but he still gets him out, and he has a couple guys he'll eat breakfast with.
Nice.
So enough to keep him going.
Well, and enough to give you a break.
Yes.
Enough for you to know that, hey, he's getting outside, he's getting fresh air. There's other people that are going to recognize if there's any changes.
Right.
And know him and are going to care for him and not take advantage of him. I mean, I think that's a big help too. So when you look at this process and we look at going through a transition and how we have at some point a goodbye and we have a messy middle and we have a new beginning, where do you feel like you are in this process?
Oh, we're definitely in the messy middle. Definitely in the messy middle, and there's a lot more to come. Definitely. And so we're realizing, actually on the way here, I had a conversation with my brother that we're realizing it's spiraling a little faster than we would like.
Right.
So
and how do we plan now for that?
Right. So we're going to have to start making some decisions.
Yeah. What's been the most difficult part of this process for you?
Because my dad is single and lives alone, seeing him so lonely. Even though he doesn't remember whether he saw anybody yesterday, he's just lonely and he just wants people around.
Yeah.
Knowing that, we have full schedules and lives too. We aren't able to be there as much as I would like to be, and seeing that loneliness hurts.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Was he living on his own for quite some time before the car accident, or?
For it's probably about 6 years. So, I mean, it wasn't,
But he could get out and go, and like you said, he's got the golf buddies and the friend. And
exactly. And so he was able to do more. Now because of all of this too, physically, he doesn't move as much, so it doesn't move as well. Even walking, we're at a point now that we have to get the handicap parking spots for him because it's too far for him to walk from his car to the door of a store.
Sure. We built a house a few years ago, and my husband was insistent on having grab bars everywhere. And I just kept thinking, why do we need grab bars? Are you kidding?
We're not that old, right?
Well, right. We're not that old. But then I thought, well, wait a minute. Every time my parents come over to visit, having that grab bar is helpful.
Right.
Or when you're in the shower and you're rinsing your hair and sometimes you pull your head forward and you get a little woozy, having that grab bar is helpful. And, that planning, that foresight, I think really he was right. That's the bottom line.
Well, you never know, too, whether you're going to have an injury of some sort that helps you, right? That you need. My husband ruptured his Achilles, so, I mean, in situations like that, that's, those bars would be great.
Right. Or to not have that step-in tub for your shower or things like that are helpful.
Right.
Yeah, I know there's a place called Memory Home Care Solutions, and they have a house built that has different tips and tricks in it. So, for example, there's a black rug in front of the door so that somebody who is cognitively declining views that as a hole, and so they won't step across it and go out the front door.
Right.
Because they are, threatened by that, thinking it's a hole.
Right.
And they use different color masking tape for different things throughout the home. And, just sometimes those tips and tricks and talking to different people, I would imagine, is helpful, finding out, hey, how do we deal with this?
Absolutely. I mean, everybody's journey is different. And so they all have different experiences and things to share, and learning a lot from people.
Yeah. And what works for one doesn't always work for another.
Just, even the elderly humans, just like us, we're all different, and we all react differently to different things. So finding what works for them is the challenge.
Well, I certainly appreciate you sharing this story and your vulnerability. I know it's difficult to talk about, but, any of the listeners out there are going through the same thing, I'm sure that they've learned a lot from you and learned tips and tricks, which is important.
Well, thanks for having me and, for allowing me to share the story because, it is something I hadn't thought about prior to that phone call from my husband. My dad was fine.
Right. So important to think about and to do the best we can to plan so that navigating through the transition is a little bit more smooth.
Right.
Well, if you'd like to reach out to Pam, she's at blindambitionstl.com and certainly encourage you to support Blind Ambition. I'm Karen Maurer with Her Next Chapter, where we help women prepare for and thrive during life's transitions. We will see you next week.
Thank you.